to the eighth Welcome to the 8th year of NGSS ESS webinars. Our webinar series is kicking off this fall with a webinar on using the lens of cross-cutting concepts to design effective earth science learning experiences. And joining me today is Ed Robeck from American Geosciences Institute. Aida Awad will join us momentarily. She's from NAGT, and John McDarris is our tech person helping us out and making sure everything is running really smoothly behind the scenes. So thank you so much, John, for joining us and supporting us in that way. As with most webinars, I'm sure you're familiar with the Zoom platform, and we ask you that you just mute your microphone during the webinar, just to keep those stray noises in the background out of the recording. So joining us in our webinar today is Dr. Brett Criswell, who's an assistant professor of secondary education at Westchester University, and his colleague, Dr. Christopher Romilly, who's an associate professor in the Department of Earth and Space Sciences at Westchester University. They will provide a wonderful presentation for us. I'm looking forward to being engaged and learning about cross-cutting concepts. Afterwards, we'll have time for discussion and Q&A. But please keep in mind that our chat box tends to be pretty active, and that's a great place for you to put questions in there, comments, and let's make that an active place to continue our learning while we're listening and engaging, and make it a community experience. At the end of the webinar, we ask that you participate in a survey about the webinar, and then from that, some PD certificates may be provided. And we value every single one of your comments, so please do take part in that. And just a little bit of advertising before we jump in and get started. We have our fall series already set up. Our next date will be going back to our Thursdays, usual third Thursday of the month. And on October 20th, artist Harold and her colleague Justine will be joining us to share some of the wonderful learning opportunities that they've designed for the Vera Rubin Observatory. And then on November 17th, Kate Soriano from NSTA will be joining us and sharing the NSTA sense-making tool and how to use it in Earth and Space Science classroom. So please get those dates on your calendar so you can join us again for those particular events. So just a reminder that all of our webinars are recorded, and then they're shared out in two places. One place is on the NAGT site where you registered, and then and any resources that the presenters share with us, you will also find on that site. However, you may also find a playlist. AGI has a playlist for the webinar series, and you may find the recordings there. Please allow for approximately a week or less for us to get those recordings up and available for you to peruse. And today's webinar, again, use the chat box to engage. The title is Using the Lens of Cross-Cutting Concepts to Design Effective Earth Science Learning Experience. And with that, take it away, Dr. Criswell and Dr. Romilly.
Cool. And then Missy, can you share? Okay, cool. Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
I was intimidated when we were told that there were upwards of 200 people that had signed up for this, and but I'm glad that we still have 50 people here. That's awesome. And just a really quick background to frame this experience for you all. I was a high school science teacher for 15 years in Pennsylvania before getting my PhD, and then I went to Georgia for a few years where I saw science teaching that was at times discouraging going on in classrooms. And then I moved to Kentucky, and I saw some of the best science teaching I've seen in my entire career happening there. And the difference was one thing, and that was that Kentucky had fully adopted and bought into NGSS. And in the state that Chris and I are in, Pennsylvania, we recently adopted more or less NGSS for our new state standards. So it's an exciting time for us here. And I really believe in NGSS, and particularly the segment of NGSS that we're going to be talking about today, the cross-cutting concepts. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to make sure that our heads were in the right space. And to me, that means we have to understand the core principle in which the NGSS pedagogy is built. And for that, I want to share a video with you. It's about 2 minutes and 22 seconds long. It tells the story of Susan Berry. You can actually find about this on NOVA. There's a PBS page devoted to her. And as I'm sharing this with you, I want to ask you to do one simple thing. I want to ask you to think about the story she's sharing and her experience with her vision and changes in it over time, and think about how that might relate to the kind of changes in curriculum that the next generation science standards are proposing. And afterwards, I'll try and kind of share why I picked this video for you. So without further ado, let's hear the story of Susan Berry. Oh my gosh. Share your computer audio. Oh, sorry. First, my computer has a block. There we go.
One of the things I love about what I study is the fact that the brain can change. I have been cross-eyed since the very first months of life. One of my eyes might be looking at you like this, and then the other eye was turned in and looking somewhere else. So I did not develop the capacity to see in 3D. In my 2D world, space was compressed. So if there was a dirt mark on the mirror, it would appear to be a dirt mark on myself. And I would try to rub it off of myself. And I had problems learning to read. My parents were told by the school principal that I was a dim bulb. It felt awful. I always felt that there was nothing I can do about it. I was just born with this condition, and that's just the way it was. When I was in my 20s and 30s, my eyes looked relatively straight because of the surgeries that I had, and I read well, although I read slowly. But as I got older, my vision became jittery. So I went to see a developmental optometrist. Our initial goal was just to stabilize my gaze. The most important ability that I learned was how to point the two eyes at the same place at the same time. I used the Brock string, I used polarized vectograms, and I used devices like the Marsden ball. And suddenly, I'm jumping on a trampoline. And to my astonishment, along the way, I began to see in 3D. That experience was unbelievably joyful. It was like this revelation. It was a late winter day, you know, when the snowflakes are really big and gloppy. I could see the palpable pockets of space between the different snowflakes, and it was like this beautiful three-dimensional dance. Light fixtures seemed to be floating. Sink faucets would jut out toward me. I could see the space between leaves on a tree, and I would go inside these spaces just to experience that sense of immersion. And this was among the most empowering, liberating experiences of my life.
I love to end with those words. When Susan Berry was able to train her eyes to focus on the same thing at the same time, she experienced the world in a rich way she hadn't before. And as she said, it was the most empowering and liberating experiences of her life. And I argue that the NGSS like teaching, and the three things that Chris is going to talk about in a few seconds, if we can integrate them and bring them together within our lessons and learning experiences for our students, can create the same kind of rich, wonderful, meaningful experiences for our students in our earth science classes. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk about the three dimensions that we have to bring together in NGSS to make that happen.
Hello, everyone. While Brett's getting that up, I'm also a former classroom teacher. I taught also for 15 years. I guess we have that in common, Brett, in New Jersey, which is where I met Missy Holzer, and decided to have a midlife crisis and get my PhD. And I've been at Westchester for in my 6th year here, where I teach science methods classes and geology as well. So three dimensions. And I think if we, like Brett said, if we start teaching what that idea of using the NGSS 3 dimensions, and like you said, Pennsylvania's newly adapted version of the NGSS into its own original scaffold, I guess. So we have our performance expectation. That's not a curriculum, but it is what we expect our students to understand or be able to do by the end of our instruction, whether that we are thinking of it in as a lesson or as a unit. And that includes our 3 strands. If we think of the rope with 3 strands twisted around each other, where one of those is the DCI, the core idea, which is the factual information, the key concepts and terminology, processes that we expect our students to know. How do we get there? Well, we want to engage them in the practices of doing science, and sometimes we call that the process skills and all those things, the measuring and observing and inferring and classifying, performing an investigation and with variables and quantitative skills and argumentation, claim evidence reasoning, all of those. But then there's that overarching aspect, and that's that third strand. How do we actually get there? If we're thinking with the end in mind, if we're backward designing our curriculum, even an individual lesson, we want to use a particular pathway. And it's that third strand, that third piece of twine, that cross-cutting concept helps us get there. We can think of the CCC as our theme. Every storybook, children's book, adult fiction, whatever, has a theme to it. There's always a moral to a story, right? And the cross-cutting concept, as I see it, and as I teach my students in methods classes, it is that theme. It's if there's another way we want to think about it, it's we could use lots of different analogies about that cross-cutting concept. So do I have power? I know you're controlling this the slideshow, Brett, right? Mm-hmm. So we wanted to talk about today about what they are and how we can use them in instruction, and how we can help students to use them as well. So we want to be able to design lessons with that theme in mind, and getting our students to understand those phenomena that we're exploring using those cross-cutting concepts, while still being able to get to that performance expectation by using the process skills or the science and engineering practices. So a little plug from the National Research Council. So if that third strand of twine wrapped around isn't the analogy that does it for you, sometimes I've used the analogy of that it's the icing on a cake, where the tools that you make the cake with, the bowl, the mixer, and everything else, are your process skills, and that the content is the crumb, the DCI is the crumb of the cake. Another analogy might be, if we want to go, Brett, to it's a frame, a picture frame that kind of takes us, that frames our lesson. If we're not thinking of it as the theme or the moral of our lesson, a frame, how are we getting there? And so the cross-cutting concept can link those experiences in our curricula, and it's a lens to for our students to make sense of those phenomena, and to also to think scientifically with each of the cross-cutting concepts, how we phrase our questions and how we want our students to answer those questions by using those cross-cutting concepts there. I think another analogy I've heard that I actually really like is it's the interstate highway. If the end of our lesson is the destination, and if we're backward designing our lessons, then we need to play a road to get there. So an interstate highway, why not? Works as well.
Okay. So just a personal experience to share with you, and I hate to actually give numbers to this, but I started teaching in 1988. I taught for 6 years or so, and thought I was doing a decent job, and like I got this teaching thing down. And then I took a year to work on my master's in science education, and it was just at the time that the first set of national standards came around. For those that aren't as old as me, may not remember this, in 1995, the National Science Education Standards were created, and at the same time, the AAAS benchmarks for science literacy were created. And in one of the courses that I was taking in my master's program, we looked at the AAAS benchmarks. And I read this chapter on the common themes with these broad overarching ideas. And they talked in the chapter about building curriculum around them. And I thought how fascinating that would be to do that, and how little I had been trying to do that to that point. And so I went back and basically reconstructed my curriculum around big ideas. And I saw the difference that it made. I saw the difference in students' ability to connect learning experiences in different part of the course together, and link concepts together. And so we're pushing the cross-cutting concepts as a tool for you to be able to do that. So this idea of the big ideas, whether they're called the unifying concepts in NSES, standards, AAAS, common themes, whatever, there are these overarching ideas that are across all of the sciences. And in the NGSS, they're referred to as the cross-cutting concepts, and there are 7 of them. And while I can't make you memorize them like I ask my students to remember them, because I want them to start being able to pull them out of their head and recognize when they're appearing. Hopefully through this experience today, you can become more familiar with them and what they can do for you. And just an example of this, patterns. All sciences try to look for and make sense of patterns. And if we can have students find patterns, one of the activities I do with my pre-service teachers is I've pulled pictures off the internet of flowering plants, and I say, look at these plants, look at these pictures, and see if you can find any pattern in them. And the pattern that it turns out is present is that the number of petals in most flowering plants fits into the Fibonacci sequence of 3, 5, 8, 13, and so forth. And so what science does is we recognize these patterns, and then science tries to explain them. Why would the flowering plant number of petals match this numeric sequence? And we have ideas for that, and it helps us better understand plants and the way they function, and the way they have evolved over time. And so that's what these things can do for our students. If we're explicit about talking about them with our students, then they can use them, they can identify patterns, they can understand cause-effect relationships, they can explore things with systems thinking in their head. And that's what we think is the real strength of using the cross-cutting concept. But first, we have to see where they are in our curriculum. And so we wanted to, after this introduction and background, give you a chance to do just that. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to talk about the activity, and then I'm going to be setting you up to do the activity.
Yeah, so we want to get you into some breakout rooms. I'm not sure whether we're going to do 2 per CCC.
I think we are, Chris.
Probably are. We have a fair amount of people. Oh, over 60 now. Okay. So each of the breakout rooms, there'll be a Jamboard link that we put into the chat, and each of the Jamboards is a different or cross-cutting concept. And then with the people in your breakout room, we'd like you to think about content to which can tie to that particular cross-cutting concept. And we want to see if we can get like 4 or 5 or so different content connections amongst the people in your breakout room that ties to that cross-cutting concept. And then give you a few minutes to collaborate and just think it and work together and put those ideas on the Jamboard in either a text or a sticky note. And we'll come back and just kind of have a quick share out from the different rooms, and we'll go through each of the cross-cutting concepts and see what comes up from each of the cross-cutting concept rooms. So I think.
All right. So I think our tech supporter, John's going to help create the breakout rooms. What we're going to do is we're going to have 2 groups teach cross-cutting concepts, just so there aren't so many people in each room. And if you could use your group number to determine which Google Jamboard slide you're going to use. So it basically, the group number can be corresponded to the number at the top of the slide. So John, if you could create those rooms and send people out.
Yep, here we go.
Excellent. All right.
I forgot what that looked like when everybody left and all the flashing happened. It gets,
Oh, that bothers your eyes.
yeah. I forgot. It's been a while. It's
Sure,
virtual teaching.
Fortunately, we've been on
Thank goodness.
Zoom for a while. So it's 4:19 when they go out. We want to give them to like 4:24.
You know, at the max. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we? You want to go like take a look at different rooms,
Yeah,
or
I guess I can.
we have that ability, right, John? To like migrate into different rooms?
I don't know. Check it. Check it out. See if you do you have the breakout rooms
I wonder-
button?
I gotta find myself first.
Well, I should be able, I at least should be able to see the Google.
You can see how
Jamboard,
things are.
the Jamboard to see what they're typing on there.
Yeah,
So I've got somebody in room 10 asking for help, so I'll be right back. Daryl, before I go, I'm going to move you into room number 14. They should be able to help you get situated when you get there.
Molly, can we assist you in getting to your breakout room? She might have stepped away.
Nope.
All square. So did you find whether or not you have the ability to move yourself?
I don't seem to be appearing
So
on
well,
the list of,
you
I
are.
think I can just
You're a
put join. I can just click on join and
Yes.
go in there. Okay.
Yeah, since you're a
Okay.
co-host, you can just join.
All right. And I need the Jamboard link so I can see how they're doing. Let's see, how can I do this? Yes, join me.
Don, I see Ada in our question doc, so she might be trying to get joined, so keep an eye out for her, so.
Hi, folks. I was put into group number 11 and I realized I was on my work. I'm on remote desktop, so I ended up going to my work email, accidentally, so I'm home. But anyway, I can wait.
Yeah, we'll be back in just a minute or so. We're gonna bring
Yeah.
back on there too.
Sounds good.
Nice. Hmm.
Brett, how long did you want this one to be?
I think maybe like another minute. We'll bring him, send a message out to bring him. It looks like I can broadcast the message to him.
If you've got the access to the breakout room controls, you can send a broadcast or you can close the rooms. And
Yeah, I think I'll send a message out that we're
they
going
get
to
a
give another minute. Give him
Yeah,
another
they get a
minute.
60-second. They get a 60-second
Okay.
message when we close the rooms.
So I'll just send him a message. So I'll give another minute. All right, Chris, I'm gonna send them a message to bring them back. They've had 5 or 6 minutes. And I've seen the Jamboards, and most groups have at least a couple, if not multiple ideas on the pages. So that's cool. All right. Here we go.
Did you want to share the Jamboards as we go through them, or
Yep, I can do that.
want to share the screen? Yeah.
Would you rather the slides or the Jamboard? Let me know. I'll do either one.
Yeah, the Jamboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
It makes some sense.
He's coming back now. Okay.
So yeah, Chris, you're ready. Just give me a signal. I'll bring up the Jamboard.
Yeah. All right, so we just want to just go through the different cross-cutting concepts and each Jamboard page. If somebody from that room would just like to kind of maybe pick one of the things that they decided to put on there and one of the sticky notes, and just kind of explain why, or maybe explain real quick explanation as to why you put that particular idea came up. So let's start off with Jamboard and group 1 with patterns. Who is in there?
I was in group 1. Ed, I saw that you unmuted too. We picked moon phases, predicting patterns and motions of the sun and moon, but particularly moon phases.
Right. Okay. How about another, the second patterns group? Thank you. Somebody from group 2?
Hello. We kind of talked about the similar things. Rotation, revolution, earthquake patterns, eclipses, wind patterns.
Yeah,
as we move
patterns.
through the
That's
unit.
great with tectonics, plate tectonics, right? Types of boundaries. All right. And then
And I think if I can mention something, I think that the nice thing to think about there is that we can tie that into data. You know, some patterns aren't just in our observables, but also in the data that we collect, and having kids help learn to use data to recognize patterns.
All right, cause and effect.
I was thinking about like phenomena, specific phenomena that I might see or that children might see. So things like waterfalls, and having to discuss the cause and effect behind that.
Great.
Erosion, tides, tide charts, things like that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And the next group from cause and effect, who was in there?
We were 4 people here, and we thought of writing just some content that we teach in cause and effect, but related also to the earth, the moon, the tides.
Excellent, thank you. And then
if I can just mention too, this is the one we're going to highlight for you. Cause effect is kind of a cornerstone of science, but kids struggle understanding other than simple linear cause effect relationships, understanding those more complex ones.
All right, scale, proportion, and quantity.
I was in that group, and we had a lot of great sort of powers of 10 types of narratives there.
Yeah.
And in addition to time, not just size scales as well.
Right, absolutely. Okay, and the next group, also scale, proportion, and quantity.
We talked about a number of things, but one that I thought was fascinating was thinking about relative time, the geologic time scale.
Yeah.
Just kind of thinking about the relationship between time, you know, as it relates to how things have evolved and what informs the numbers and types of fossils that we see in different layers, you know, all the way through present day.
Excellent, thank you. All right. And then the next, systems and system models. Somebody from group 7?
We talked about, we were putting up a lot of examples and then realized we hadn't talked activities. But with creating models, you know, with different systems and with, you know, especially with young children, models are so important.
Right, right, excellent, thank you. And then the next systems group?
Everyone left my group except for me, so I just tried to put down some ideas. Sorry that the font is so small, but mainly having kids see models, look at things that are not well explained by a model, and that examples of how complicated it can get. Try to keep it to earth and space science.
Yeah, okay. All right, energy and matter next. Group 9.
Okay, so we had a little bit of difficulty communicating because of sound issues, but I put those 3 sticky notes there, so it's a bit obvious I come from physics because that's kind of all I was able to
There's
think
definitely
about.
a connection between earth science and physics for sure.
Yeah, but I did physics and then geophysics, so it became a mixture. But yeah, the idea of understanding conservation of energy in terms of how it transforms from one type of energy to another one, that's more or less what I was aiming for here.
Right.
And if I can say something about what you just said, I think one of the powers of the cross-cutting concepts is they connect the disciplines together instead of the isolation of the disciplines. And especially with a topic like energy, where in different disciplines we tend to talk about it slightly differently. This can be a way to connect them, like through conservation of energy, through these core principles, and something to think about for you as you want to connect your content to other science content.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Jeff here, when Brett mentioned disciplines just then, I had to just a question came to mind whether we're talking about disciplines within science or outside of science. I tend to think of cross-cutting as reaching out to other disciplines outside of science.
Also as that as well.
Yeah. I think with energy matter, it's like the poster child for earth science to me. So we could have just like listed all day. But I had a little fun with trying to be the kids and writing, getting sleepy after lunch and thinking about energy and matter and getting the kids start thinking about what was going on there. And then start maybe applying it to doing the same thing we're doing is applying it to other concepts.
That's right. All right, great, thank you. And then structure and function. Group 11.
I thought of the structure of a mineral determines so many different properties, the hardness, the fracture, cleavage, crystal form, that just the basic chemical structure controls multiple aspects of that particular mineral.
That's right. And what uses we can get from it. Right. All right, the next structure and function group.
I'll go. So we talked about how some parts of the earth and the structure of that affects its functioning.
That's right. That's right. I'm interested in that compare hurricane and galaxy, but I think in the interest of time, but I think I know what you're getting at there in terms of what we see. Interest of time. So let's go to last one, stability and change. Anybody from group 13 there? We can go to group 14, perhaps. There's some good ones on there with group 13. 13 or 14. Well, I think we can see what they have on there. So we can just continue out. So there are these big ideas with the earth sciences. The earth science, we want to go back to the slideshow, you get a chance there. And so we have pictures of all these on the slideshow. They're called patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, quantity, et cetera, through stability and change. And cross-cutting concepts also not just from NGSS or from individual state standards, but earth science was in on this picture a few years ago with the earth science literacy principles and the link to this page, which also not just has the big ideas, but also a whole information and activities based on the big ideas with relation to the earth sciences. So even if we're thinking cross-cutting concepts, and we're also thinking about the big themes in teaching the earth sciences and how they are connected as well. So this was a NSF project, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. If I'm pretty sure these were developed out of a literacy initiative that was a NSF project there.
So we get to give you resources after this webinar is done. We're going to plant some resources in the space that's provided. You know, this PowerPoint with these links and things on it will be there. And also the Google Jamboard that you created. And the idea here is for us to get you thinking about the cross-cutting concepts with hope that you'll be, when you're developing curriculum or thinking about curricular changes you want to make, you'll be thinking of those and trying to bring those in. And then, of course, that you start getting your students thinking about those and using this terminology, cause and effect, and systems and patterns and so forth, because it will help them then think differently about their science content.
Your verbiage in the classroom of using those terms in your questions and how you want them to respond is critical. And this is something that we go over in the methods classes that I teach. I'm sure Brett probably uses a similar format and trying to get those 7 CCCs ingrained in their heads.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we're going to provide you is a tool created by a group out of the University of Washington that developed what's called the Ambitious Science Teaching Framework. And it's probably one of the best frameworks for transforming the ideas behind NGSS into pedagogical practice. And one of the tools that they created is called the Big Idea tool. And it's really focused on how we take those big ideas and use to create first lessons and then larger units. And so one of the things we don't have time to take you through the tool, but we will put the tool in the resources. But basically what the tool suggests you do is first, thinking about what standard you want to teach, and then what cross-cutting concept or other big idea can you tie to it, and then looking for phenomenon that can integrate that cross-cutting concept, that big idea into it, and also allow you to get at the content that you want to get to. And so we want to talk about this for a little bit. Hopefully phenomenon is a word that is just ingrained in everybody's mind now with, the NGSS having such a pervasive influence. And this is from an article it was in the Science Teacher by Inouye. Unfortunately, I can't make this available, but you can look it up. So it talks about phenomenon and what really they are. And I think really some important things to understand is that phenomenon are things that students can think about, can make sense of. I don't know that they're always observable things. I mean, they're things that we can see maybe sometimes the results of, but they're not concepts. They are things that we explore with students. And a really important thing about this is that they create an opportunity for students to think scientifically. And that's really kind of the core thing. And the scientific thinking part, we all understand, I think we all agree that's important, but how do we do it? And what we're trying to argue in this webinar is that the cross-cutting concepts are a tool for helping kids think scientifically. And to show you that, we'll let Chris take you through a really simple phenomenon, one I can remember from my own childhood, and actually a few times getting hit in the side of my head by my dad because I was playing around during dinner time. But a phenomenon that seems really simple on the surface, but can't be understood without the power of one of the cross-cutting concepts to provide a lens to make sense of what's going on in that phenomenon. So I'm going to turn it over to let Chris do the phenomenon for you, and we're going to ask you to engage in trying to make sense of it. And then we're going to show you how one of the cross-cutting concepts can help with that process.
And that word phenomenon, I think, is also important, that if you're using that in front of your students, but I think the other aspect is that it's not always a scientific phenomena that we want to engage our students with is not always phenomenal. It's not a big explosion, immediate boom. these could be very subtle and discrete, and even data and graphs can be used to initiate and anchor a lesson, be the phenomena themselves. So let's see, I guess I need to spotlight myself.
Yepper.
Okay, let's see if I can do that. Oh, hello. All right, so I have a lot of straws in a glass, a cup of water, and as you might expect, if I take a particular straw and it's submerged partially in the water, but if let's see if I get this here. I put my index finger there over the top and lift the straw out of the cup, you can probably predict, and you don't have to write anything down, but obviously we might want our students to actually memorialize their predictions. That's always an important aspect of doing science, memorializing their work. But you in your heads are probably thinking, well, if he lifts that out, I'd probably know what to expect. And you can see that I have my finger still over the top of the straw, and there's water in the straw. So when I put it back in there and I uncover it again, and it comes out, and it's staying in there. So you may want to take a moment, and if there's some paper in front of you and you have a pencil, you might want to sketch and or write, depending on how you prefer to engage yourself with drawing a model of something, or to explain the model about why this actually occurs. Why does that water stay in the straw when I put my finger over it, and it doesn't actually just fall right out? So if I give you a minute or two, looking at the time there, so a minute or so to kind of think about that. And I think we might just continue forward, but you know that if I release my finger from there, you can also predict what's going to happen. And indeed, the water comes out. And so we're trying to figure out, not just through the use of modeling, that students are drawing and sketching and writing as to what is actually happening with the straw. But as Brett said, this actually makes it easier. The use of a cross-cutting concept with this phenomenon and then proceeding through a lesson with this actually makes it easier. But we could also then continue with another straw, except what I did to this straw was that I took a pin and poked a little hole in there, about 1 centimeter or 2 down from the bottom, or the top, excuse me, the top of the straw. And you might already know what's going to happen, but if I do the same exact thing and put my finger over the top of the straw, you could predict what's going to happen. And well, there's a go. We observe that this straw with the hole at the top, and it really does have a hole. Let's see if you can see it there. Probably see it there in the camera. It really does have a hole there. And when we submerge it, just like the other straw, right? So one straw is holding the water, but the straw with the hole in the top does not. And again, we would use the modeling process to explain why, to try and get the kids to explain why this might happen. But really, we can take advantage of the cross-cutting concepts in order to help us proceed through the lesson.
And I'll take over there.
Sure.
Chris, Missy, and I wrote an article that appeared in the Science Teacher last spring, and we talked about this particular activity. It's from an article that was in Science Scope by McCarthy. And the fact that it's a simple phenomenon, we've probably all seen it in our lives. Perhaps some of us could correctly explain it. Perhaps some of us would miss details in our explanation. But I have done this activity with pre-service science teachers, and invariably they don't get the explanation correct. They're always missing some piece of it. And so you can imagine with your own students, the same thing would occur. They would be missing pieces. And why are they missing pieces? Because to explain this, which basically you're explaining what's the cause for the effect of the liquid staying in the straw, or when the hole's poked in it, the liquid not staying in the straw. The cause isn't a single cause. It's actually three causes combining together to produce the effect. The pressure of the air inside the straw, the pressure of the air underneath the straw, and the force of gravity, right? And so to really fully explain even this very simple phenomenon, we need to understand that there are three causal factors and they're all interacting with each other. And that's not simple for kids, especially if they don't understand cause effect beyond kind of simple linear cause effect. This happens and this is the cause behind it, right? And so one of the things we wrote about in the article is a wonderful website created by Tina Grotzer, who did some research on cause effect in science. And she wrote a book teaching cause effect in a complex world. And she created then the website from this causal patterns in science. And one of the things she showed is that even for the kind of science content and phenomenon you might explore in just upper elementary and middle school, there are at least 6 different types of causal relationships that can explain them. In the case of the straw and the drink, you have to understand relational causality. How does the pressure inside the straw, the pressure outside the straw, and the force of gravity all combine to produce the effect you see? If you don't teach kids about cause effect, they're not going to figure that out. And so we actually argue we should teach these different types of cause effect and give them experiences looking for these different types of cause effect in nature, and to help strengthen their ability to use cause effect to understand science phenomenon. And so that's why we think, that's why we want to argue that actually explicitly teaching about these cross-cutting concepts is valuable. And in the article we wrote, we talked about each cross-cutting concept and some of the ways you would explicitly teach about them to help your students understand them in the context of learning other science content you may want to learn. What we wanted to do to end this, and we were going to do this in breakout rooms, maybe we could just do this all together, is to ask you to think. We asked you a few moments ago to think of content that you might explore that would tie to particular cross-cutting concepts. We wanted to ask you to take a moment and think if you could identify a particular phenomenon and a cross-cutting concept that would support you and your students in exploring that phenomenon. We've given you one, straws, and the liquid staying in the straw is a cause effect. Can you write in the chat box, can we put ideas of what phenomenon we might have our students explore and how cross-cutting concepts, or what cross-cutting concept might help in that exploration? And I see some people are already pulling things from the Google Jamboard, because the content a lot of you mentioned has, phenomenon at its heart. Like moon phases is a phenomenon, right?
Right.
And so this should be an easy thing for you. Rainbow is a great one.
Rainbow's excellent.
Yeah, I used to talk about that to students. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, seasonal changes, the visible signs of seasonal change, right? As well as the real astronomical reason for the season changes.
As more people are sharing ideas, I have to tell you, part of the impetus for me to do this webinar and for Chris, Missy, and I to write the article we did is when I was in Kentucky and saw all the wonderful things going on around NGSS, what I didn't see was teachers using cross-cutting concepts as an integral part of the curriculum. And as I talked to teachers, it was because it was the chunk of NGSS they were least familiar with, how to use it. It's not like teachers don't understand the idea of patterns or cause effect, but they really had no idea how to teach about those cross-cutting concepts or how to integrate them in. And so the article we wrote, which we'll try to make available to you, we really tried to show some ideas about that. And was just with the simple example of the straws, we've shown how cause effect and explicitly teaching about it can support understanding of it.
Right, you want to bring up that example of the volcanoes, building the curriculum. These are all really great in what you're coming up with. And some of these, you know, to each of you, somebody might be typing something in there about weather, and some people may see weather as cause and effect. Some might be more interested in teaching using patterns as their pathway or systems. That's up to you as the individual teacher and how you design your lessons and which you choose and which cross-cutting concepts you choose. So there's I don't think there's, we're not going to tell you which one to, which cross-cutting concept you're going to use to guide you and to help you get your students to think about that particular cross-cutting concept, because each of us may see teaching about plate tectonics or wind or ocean currents using a different lens. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Sorry, Brett.
Well, I was just wanting to put because we're running short of time, making sure I put my contact information in the chat box, and I'll put the share back up there. Very good. Yeah, maybe Chris, you can just give an overview of this. And
yeah, so with regards to that site that Brett had mentioned, that's also there in terms of how you kind of think about building your curriculum and a particular phenomenon. Volcanoes are definitely phenomena, and we could probably apply a number of cross-cutting concepts in a individual lesson or a unit on volcanoes and volcanism. But what would be our anchoring phenomenon? Because we like to have that phenomenon. Volcanic eruptions can be really interesting to watch, and there's a whole bunch of them online on YouTube that are all very recent. We don't have to always go back to Mount St. Helens, but hey, why not? And then what is the story? Why are eruptions so different? So how are we planning our lesson and our unit about volcanoes and volcanism? And what are we actually trying to teach, and why volcanic eruptions are so different? If we show a picture of Hawaii and people getting up close, tourists, I was guilty of that, where they kind of let you pretty up close in Hawaii. And then, but other volcanoes are extremely dangerous, and much more ash goes up, and there's much more danger and the impact to the land and all the different spheres is much, much greater. And so why does that occur? If we think about what's causing that, and so using the cross-cutting concepts to help us get through that. And what is the actual explanation for that? What are we after in our teaching, in our curriculum with that? And how can we relate it? How can we use other phenomena, other demonstrations in order to do so? I think that got that, because I think we're getting really close to our time allotment.
Yeah, and so just a closing thing, and then we'll take questions. You know, I started off with the Susan Berry video because I think it creates a perfect metaphor for what NGSS teaching is all about. Bringing together the disciplinary core ideas, science and engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts to make the richest lessons and learning experiences for our students. The cross-cutting concepts has been the most troublesome spot in that area, and that's why we want to provide this webinar. I'm glad to provide, if you want some more information about some of the things we talked about, provide any of this to you. I put my name in my contact information in the chat box. I'm sure the Chris the same way. By the way, somebody noticed my shirt. Just wanted to plug out here for Women in Science. I tested my students in the methods class, and they knew about 2 out of the 12 or so women on here, which was very discouraging. So I said, you got to get on this and get yourself more knowledgeable about other people besides old white men. So any questions or comments?
Thank you for allowing us this time to spend with you.
Lovely spending the time with you. Any questions or things?
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much. This was really terrific to see and to get to engage so much with it. There have been a couple of questions. One of the questions was the brainstorming activity that you had us do with the Jamboard and such. Have you done that with students and like K-12 students? And if so, like, how does that go?
I've done it with pre-service teachers, and they struggle a lot more than you all did. And if you can think about it, you know, your years of experience teaching, even if the cross-cutting concepts aren't first and foremost in your mind, you're at least aware of the big ideas. And I think one of the things that pre-service teachers struggle and new teachers struggle with is seeing these bigger ideas. It took me a few years to see the bigger picture, the bigger ideas of the discipline. And so I think it is important with our pre-service teachers and with young students to get them thinking about the big ideas, and it takes some time. I haven't done it with that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think the pre-service teachers are key, you know, when teaching them, because if they can get ingrained in using it and thinking about their lessons, designing them with that in mind, and then that means it gets translated, hopefully, when they are when they get their teaching jobs.
If you didn't see Julie, what a wonderful shameless plug in the chat box there, which is awesome. I wish AST, I will be there. So I'm going to look forward to seeing that. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that. What's going on? Excellent.
I do see one hand up.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, so my name is Tori. I work in New York State, and I find the biggest problem with this whole concept is, you know, these cross-cutting ideas, this major phenomenon. They're all wonderful, but now you're dealing with a unit that's like this big, and I've got 10 units this big now to teach in the 10 months of school. How do you? I need advice. I need recommendations on how to keep this streamlined.
Well, I think, you know, if you're going to do what the ambitious science teaching suggests, you're not going to get 10 big units in. I think states where they've adopted NGSS and there aren't as many standards that we're expected to cover, it's more reasonable. But I think what you can do is look for small ways to bring this into a lesson, to, you know, take a few minutes. Like the causal patterns in science slide I showed has little videos where kids can figure out, oh, hey, here's this example, this phenomenon in nature. What type of cause effect do you think it is? And that's 5 minutes of a lesson you could spend doing that. So I think I'm realistic about time constraints teachers have. I think there are ways to bring this in a smaller scale than we've talked about, where you take a few minutes out of a lesson, and then you can get into the main content of your lesson by letting them think about across, or what's the pattern here in this data, or here's some data and here's a pattern in it, but this piece of data doesn't fit it. What do we do about that? I think
I would definitely approach it from an individual lesson.
Yeah.
And try and incorporate a cross-cutting concept that way, with one individual lesson, and then try it again, or a different cross-cutting concept.
And just
stick with one you really like.
I have my pre-service teachers try. I get tired of the same bell ringers and openings, and I say start off with a bell ringer, just a quick couple-minute activity where you have kids try and recognize a pattern or try to identify the cause-effect relationship that's in existence here.
Right.
And that can be a way to get at this without having to deal with breaking down your schedule.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
And
Chris,
speaking
we're gonna.
of time. Go ahead, Missy.
Okay, thank you so much for Brett, Chris, and everybody that participated today. Unfortunately we're running against a clock, so we're going to move forward. However, Chris and Brett might stay behind for a few minutes as we wrap this up. So if you have additional questions, please stay behind for just a few minutes. So here we go. Just to let's see, my screen to go. There we go. Just a reminder that our webinar series has officially begun with today's webinar, and the next two dates coming up that are on your calendars, please. The Vera Rubin Observatory, an NGSS approach to exploring our solar system. Join us for that one, where you learn about a number of new activities designed for astronomy. Will be shared by Artist Harold and her colleague Justine. And then November 17th, Kate Soriano from NSTA will be sharing the sense-making tool, the NSTA sense-making tool. So please plan on joining us for those two events. Reminder that all of our webinars are archived either on the AGI YouTube channel or on the NAGT site where you registered. You'll find all of the webinars archived there, as well as the resources that go with the webinars. Again, we ask that you take the survey. We look forward to hearing about your thoughts about our webinar series. It helps us plan for the future. And then join us today was NAGT. We had John here from NAGT, and Aida Awad wasn't able to join us today, but if she were here, she'd tell you a little bit about NAGT. So consider joining that wonderful organization that is an earth science organization from K to 16, and they have a wonderful suite of resources and events, and highly recommend that you join them, as well as joining NESTA, National Earth Science Teachers Association, where our focus is K-12 education. We have a quarterly journal called The Earth Scientist, monthly e-news, as well as we're on social media, and we also participate in presentations. Ed, real quick.
Yeah, hi everybody. American Geosciences Institute has many different programs. I'm just going to plug one today. I just put the link to Earth Science Week, which happens next month, the second full week of October each year. This year's theme is Earth Science for a Sustainable World. So please visit the website and make use of the materials to bring sustainability into your teaching too. And thanks very much everybody for being here. And thanks very, very much to our presenters and to John for making sure everything ran smoothly, and to you, Missy. John also put the webinar survey link in the chat, so that's also there for everyone.
Okay, and thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in our other two events this fall.
Thanks all.